Okay, this video is Dr. Amen Corrected, Daniel Amen. Okay, so one of my colleagues asked me to check out this guy's work and see what I thought of it. I've actually read several of his books before, and he's a world famous. He's actually declared the most famous psychiatrist in America, probably in the world. Okay, he's an MD. He did psychiatry training. He also got trained as a child psychiatrist. Okay, now where do I have some disagreements with him? First of all, he presents these scans, which are a form of nuclear medicine SPECT scan, and to me, they're absolute nonsense. I see zero, as in zero, zero useful information on those scans. And I've heard him speaking to patients on some other shows where he tells the patient you have a hole in your head when he's describing their scan. And to me, that sounds like absolute BS. If I see a so-called hole in the person's brain on a CT scan, CAT scan, or on a brain MRI, that usually means, there's a few things that can mean. It could mean a stroke, like that would typically imply a lacunar infarction, an irreversible thing. It could also imply right at the basal ganglia, right where the middle cerebral artery branches come up into the brain, the lenticular striate arteries. That could imply what's called a normal variant dilated perivascular space of Virchow-Robin. Okay, it's sort of like the CSF space tailing up into the brain parenchyma. And that's also, we consider it a normal variant. It potentially gets larger with aging. It's no big deal, but that also is irreversible. So this idea of him implying a reversible hole in a person's brain, if they take his advice and do what he says, that to me sounds like absolute BS. It just sounds like deception, telling people this scan is meaningful. I think it looks like 100% nonsense. I'm not even saying 99% nonsense. I see zero useful information on those scans. And I'm a neuroradiologist. I look at brain images and study the brain every day. Okay, he also promotes a lot of drugs, which is what you'd expect for a psychiatrist. Okay, we talked about it before. Psychiatry drugs don't work well. In a sense, they're like a chemical lobotomy. Okay, most of them. Don't get me wrong. There's special situations when patient might really benefit a lot from a drug, with an acute psychotic episode, for example. Okay, the famous psychologist Jordan Peterson is also a big drug promoter. Okay, and that's one of the points I'm going to make here is, if you're a good drug dealer, you get promoted on the internet, okay? And it helps you to become famous. So I hate to say this, but there's tremendous pressure, tremendous reward on a doctor to basically prostitute themselves and be a drug dealer, okay? Good things happen to drug dealers, okay? It's weird, but it's true. Jordan Peterson and Daniel Amen are both idiots about food. I'd say Jordan Peterson's worse. Amen's much more reasonable than Jordan Peterson as far as food is concerned. But he says stupid stuff. He says, eating fish is good for the brain. Eating fish is what lazy, ignorant people say about is good for the brain. Come on, the fish got mercury in it. It's very high in saturated fat. It's routinely fried. It's got PCBs. The oceans and the lakes are like a sewer. There's tons of chemicals. I don't even want to go into fish. There's more problems than that, but that's stupid advice to tell somebody for brain health, okay? So that would suggest, that he hasn't really done his studying. Okay, and then just to make a point, people say, why do I say psychiatry drugs are stupid? And I'll tell you why, because I studied them, okay? Take a look at this. Here's a paper about fluoxetine, and the brand name of that is Prozac. This is one of the most famous antidepressant medicines in the history of the world. This was whole part of the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors that were sweeping the world by storm, going back into the 1990s, super popular. Everybody thinks they're so great, better than the old antidepressants, fewer side effects. Yeah, right. Now here is a paper that I think is funny. Notice the name of the journal, Oncotarget. Okay, this is in a cancer chemotherapy journal, all right? And they noticed that Prozac, fluoxetine, was such a destructive drug. It causes necrosis. That means cell death by depleting energy, inhibiting mitochondria so they can't make ATP, and leading to the cell becoming flooded with calcium, including the mitochondria becoming calcium overloaded till the cells die. So the point of this paper was to recommend fluoxetine to be considered for cancer chemotherapy. Now, some poor person is sad about something in their life, they get labeled as depressed, and they give them a drug that's so toxic, it's recommended to be used for cancer chemotherapy. That's just complete stupidity. And that's why I say, there's tons of evidence that food and mood go together. There's all kinds of things you can do to improve a person's psyche with food. There's all kinds of things you can do with religion, okay, with avoiding toxins. And you ought to try all those things first before you go to this step, okay? But anyways, there's more to it than that, obviously, but I think that's an important point. So these big promoters of psychiatric drugs that act so confident in what they're saying, they really are not acting in the patient's best interest, in my opinion. All right, and then here's the other thing he does. He sells lots of supplements at his website. Okay, again, a big money maker. And I've had viewers tell me, if you want to make money, you've got to sell supplements. That's where the money is, okay? And by the way, just to show you, how is this rewarded? He's the most famous psychiatrist in America. He's done over 225,000 of those SPECT scans on his patients' brains that, in my opinion, provide zero useful information. Look at this. He's on all the famous magazines. He's on all the famous TV shows. He's interviewed by Dr. Oz, by Dr. Phil. He's on the most famous TV news channels. The most famous channel, BBC. So that's what I'm saying. If you lie to people, you rip them off, you do fake imaging tests on them, you sell them drugs that don't work, you become famous, celebrated, beloved, okay? And if you're a chump like me, you tell people the truth, you can't monetize your channel, you make zero money, you get shadow banned. This is where things are at. Modern science. It's all a bunch of lying. Modern science means sophisticated lying.